A lot of people think that the greatest military defeats are when one side completely annihilates the other. When we hear about Genghis Khan's conquests or the Battle of Stalingrad, we don't usually think about these being tactical defeats for the winners. We think about entire armies wiped off the face of the earth. But there are times where a battle is won but the victors suffer heavy losses. And sometimes the cost of victory can actually change the course of history. In 1453, the last stronghold of classical antiquity fell after an 8-week siege. Today, if you visited the former capital of the Roman Empire, you would find it in a rough part of modern-day Turkey called Istanbul. If you walked around the city, you might notice that most of the landmarks from antiquity have been destroyed over the past 500 years. However, there is one building that stands out amongst all the others. It has survived for almost 1,500 years and still remains the largest and best-known building in Istanbul. It's the Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia was originally built as a cathedral in the 6th century by the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian I. Its construction took 5 years, and the building was considered a marvel of engineering at the time. The building was so large that for 1,000 years it remained the largest church in the world. For most of the medieval period, it was also the biggest dome structure ever made. The building became so synonymous with the city of Constantinople that many historians refer to it simply as the Cathedral of Constantinople. However, in 1453, the building was converted into a mosque after the Ottoman conquest of the city. And today, 700 years later, it still stands as a mosque. For centuries before the Ottomans arrived, the Christian rulers of Constantinople had fortified their city extensively. The city had deep moats, double walls, and intimidatingly tall towers. Even during the height of the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar had described how the thick walls around the city could withstand siege engines. But the city of Constantinople was never more impressive than it was in the year 1453. The fortifications were so tall and wide that some parts of the wall had to be demolished just to allow the sun to shine through. It was one of the strongest fortresses in the whole world. The main reason why conquering Constantinople was such a big deal was because of who was attacking it: the Ottoman Turks. At this time, the Ottoman Empire was one of the fastest-growing empires in history. In the early 14th century, they controlled nothing more than modern-day northwestern Turkey. By the middle of the century, they controlled the Balkans and were breathing down on the neck of the Byzantine Empire. The Ottomans were not just growing fast, they were growing in strength. They had a massive and disciplined army with some of the most advanced weaponry in the world. These weapons would soon help them destroy the mightiest walls in the world. Muslims had been trying to conquer Constantinople for 400 years. In the 7th century, the Muslim conquest of the Middle East and North Africa had gotten up to the very gates of Constantinople. But every attempt to take the city had been repelled. The reason why the Muslims wanted to capture the city was because of a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad himself. He said that one day Islam would conquer Rome, that a great leader would emerge from the Arabian Peninsula, and then he would lead a great army to conquer the city. Since then, every Muslim ruler had tried and failed to conquer the city. By the 1400s, 3 rulers had come close to taking the city. But every time the Ottomans laid siege to the city, the Byzantines managed to hold on. Even when the Ottomans had the Byzantines surrounded and ready to accept defeat, a combination of freak weather and Byzantine tenacity allowed the Byzantines to stay in the fight. But the next Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, wouldn't be denied. It's incredible to think that when the Ottoman army laid siege to Constantinople in 1453, their leader was only 21 years old. But while he may have been young, he was ambitious and brilliant. As soon as he ascended to the throne, he started planning his campaign against Constantinople. One of the first things he did was order the construction of a series of enormous cannons. With these massive guns, he hoped to tear down the imposing walls and end the threat of Byzantine resistance. But those weren't the only weapons that Mehmed planned on using. He wanted to take the city by force, so he started preparing a navy. His plan was to build ships near Belgrade and sail them down the Danube River. He would then drag the ships across the Istiklal Mountain and dump them into the Sea of Marmara. Once he had naval superiority in the area, he would attack the city from the south. The sheer audacity of building and dragging warships across mountains seemed impossible to the Europeans. But the Ottomans didn't just do it, they did it twice. Mehmed had ordered 50 ships to be built, and he planned to drag them across the mountains and assemble them in the Sea of Marmara. But once he realized that the ships were too big, he ordered another 300 smaller vessels to be constructed. The Byzantines knew that their doom was near when they saw the Ottoman fleet sailing up the coast of Thrace. Soon enough, the Ottomans had gathered a total of 2,000 ships in the Golden Horn, which was a narrow inlet that cut right through the city of Constantinople. They attacked immediately, and the Byzantines lost control of the sea. That meant that the overland supply routes into the city were now cut off. The Ottoman army had set up camp on the European side of the city, and they slowly started constructing siege engines and battering rams. At the same time, they also started digging tunnels under the city walls. On April, after a 56-day siege, the Ottoman army breached the walls of Constantinople and stormed the city. That night, the celebrations were held in the Hagia Sophia. Mehmed led a procession into the building. According to Venetian ambassador Anthony Giustiniani, the Ottoman Sultan walked barefoot into the building. A group of alamas, which were religious scholars, greeted him at the door. Then the Sultan performed a ritualistic washing ceremony and gave thanks to God. Finally, he prayed to Rakats, which was the traditional prayer for victory. Mehmed the Conqueror then converted the building into a mosque and announced that Constantinople was the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. When the rest of the Ottoman army entered the city, they wasted no time in looting it. To this day, the amount of treasure looted from the city is unknown. Some historians believe that the Sultan's treasury was filled to the brim with gold and jewels taken from the Hagia Sophia alone. Not only did the Ottomans steal valuables from homes, churches, and mosques, they also stole marble blocks, columns, and even bronze statues from public buildings. It is safe to say that the sack of Constantinople was one of the greatest acts of looting in history. But all of this destruction was in service of a greater purpose. Constantinople was situated at the crossroads between Europe and Asia. Its location made it one of the most prosperous cities in the Mediterranean. And Mehmed the Conqueror was keen on making use of that fact. His son, Bayezid II, would go on to make Istanbul the capital of the new and truly global Ottoman Empire. It's hard to overstate just how important the capture of Constantinople was for the Ottomans. In capturing the city, they got their hands on one of the largest libraries in the world. Scholars from across the region flocked to the new capital to read ancient texts. In doing so, they helped to preserve a huge chunk of classical literature for future generations. The fall of Constantinople had a huge impact on Europe. It basically ended any chance that Europe had of continuing the legacy of the Roman Empire. It also put an end to the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire, which technically lasted for another 29 years. But the empire was effectively dead when Mehmed the Conqueror captured the city. The Ottoman victory also created a Turkish buffer zone between the collapsing Mongol horde in the east and Catholic Europe in the west. Before long, the rest of the Balkan states would fall to the Ottomans. Mehmed the Conqueror's conquest of Constantinople shifted the center of Islamic civilization to the heart of Europe. When the great Ottoman statesman Kanuni Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent died in 1566, his empire stretched from North Africa through the Middle East and into southeastern Europe. As for the man who started it all, Mehmed the Conqueror died in 1481 and was buried in the courtyard of the Hagia Sophia. Today, Istanbul is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. Millions of tourists visit the city every year. Many of them go to see the Hagia Sophia and imagine what it must have been like to be present when the building was converted into a mosque 700 years ago.